and welcome back. Joining us in studio this morning is Dr. Harold Young. He is an assistant professor of political science. He's here with us this morning to talk about the recent Belize 2024 survey and to share with us his views and breaking down exactly what was shared in that document. Good morning, Dr. Young.
Good morning.
Good morning, Natani. Good morning, Sabrina. Wonderful to be here. Hi, Belize.
How's it going?
Going very well. Going very well. I know how much resistance I did yesterday on Indigenous Peoples Resistance Day, but I was there and I'm on it. I'm on it. I'm on it this morning.
Nice. All right, so where I want to begin from essentially is getting your general feedback or your view on this particular document. It's 38 pages, quite detailed if you ask me. Where do you stand on it?
So I think the document has some interesting points for us to consider and to look at. I think there are two parts to it, I think. The first part is the model that's used to predict what will happen in the next elections. I think the model itself is a well-established model. I mean, I looked at it, I know what it's about, a well-established model. What I cannot tell from the report is how it was applied, like how was it used, what were the variables, how were the variables quantified. So I'm not sure that it has a great deal of predictive value. It tells, as I said, tells some interesting things, but it doesn't. I don't think it has a great deal of predictive value.
Can you explain to our viewers what predictive value is in this context?
So in a nutshell, what the survey purports to do is to look at past elections and the relationship between aggregate vote, percentage of the popular vote. So when you aggregate all the votes for one party, what percentage? So let's make something up. One party got 52%, another party got 48%. That's not complicated with third parties or independents, right? So 52 to 48. And then it says, based on that, in previous elections, the outcome was 17 seats to 14 seats. So it's looking at the relationship between popular vote and the number of seats that result. And that doesn't work very well in Belize because aggregate vote doesn't matter, right? It doesn't have any direct impact on who becomes the representative or who becomes the government. And I say that, I'll give you an example of what I mean. In our system, Belize, not just Belize, but all the Westminster model systems, Guyana and the Caribbean is the exception. We could have a situation, I'll give you two scenarios. We could have a situation where a party wins, let's say, in our case, 31, so wins 16 seats, right? And they win all those 16 seats by one vote. So overall, they win by 60. Their victory is based on 16 votes. And the other party wins 15 seats, but in each of those constituents, they win by 1,000 votes.
Overwhelmingly.
Yes. So the popular vote is way above the amount of seats. So it's not reflective. It's a very inequitable, as far as I'm concerned, and undemocratic system. The other part of it is that the other example is, and we have one right now in the Caribbean, where a party could win all the seats, could win all 31 seats as it is in Belize, and yet maybe win 51% of the popular vote. So that means that the 49% that voted for that party gets absolutely no representation at all. And we have that in Barbados, where all the seats in the parliament are Mayor Mottley's party, the Labour Party, has all the seats. But of course, it's not 51 to 49. They won, I think, 60% of the vote, or 60 or 58, 63 or something like that. But the opposition won 40% of the vote or 35% of the vote, but they have absolutely no seats. So that's the kind of thing that we're faced with. And then so the things that we are complaining about, and when I say complaining about, justifiably, I'm not saying that, about representation, about reflection of popular will, about accountability, about transparency, about corruption, about policies, international policies, projects, those things that we complain about when the government does or doesn't do what we think they should are not being addressed. Like, how do you design a system, an electoral system, that makes it more effective, more accountable? And that's a very hard discussion to have. And I am, I don't want to say disappointed, but I'm finding it very challenging that whenever we start talking about these things, people say, oh, Belize, that's too complicated. And I'm like, no, it's not. We are a sensible bunch of people. Sometimes we think we're not, but we are.
So how do we then, quote unquote, uncomplicate it? Because while you have a lot of the findings that illustrate using figures what the percentages are between, for instance, those who are in favor of, those who are against, the language is technical. And so while we're saying that it should be presented in a common sense form, that's not always the case.
Well, I mean, what is it? I'm not sure what the question is.
My question is, you're saying that it should be straightforward and clear for anyone to be able to understand or follow along, right? But I'm saying to you that that's not necessarily the case. More often than not, when we present figures and we present findings, it's done in a either technical or legalese way where persons cannot necessarily understand what the thing is saying.
Well, okay. Well, I don't know how to respond to that. I don't. The report is a report. If you want something that's easy to understand, then we can look at things like, your people can probably bring it up, but they have the what's it called? The word thing for the two leaders, right? I bought them. So I mean that's simple to understand.
Like word association.
Word association. I mean, if you wanted something to understand, this is what you could understand, right? And so all this is saying is reflecting how many times people say certain words about the person, and then it gives it in graphic form. And if you want to talk about that, then we can talk about that. And it shows that the prime minister is fairly popular and the leader of the opposition is extremely unpopular. That's what it shows. The disparity between the two leaders is stark. I mean, no, that's not complicated. But so I'm not sure what you want. What do we want to uncomplicate?
Let's put that very same one into some kind of perspective, right? Because I think that's one of them that resonates with the public.
Sure.
The word association, which shows the popularity of one against the other, right? What bearing do you believe that this would have on perhaps the outcomes?
Okay, so that's a good question. That's a really good question. Thank you for that question, because I have that down on my notes to talk about. So, strictly speaking, as far as counting votes, like when you actually count the votes, and it doesn't have that directly. But there is a perception. So you could have somebody voting in Kaya West, right? Could say, I don't really care for either one of the two people or three people or four people that's running my constituency, but I like or don't like the person that one party says will be prime minister if they're elected. I like them, so I will vote for this person even though I don't really care for that person. I'll vote for that party person because I like the leader, right? Or I don't like the leader, so I'll vote for the other party, right? That occurs. That's not quantified. This does not quantify that. This report does not quantify that at all. There are no numbers as to that, how many people. But we know from anecdotally that, for example, when George Cadle Price was prime minister, premier, that he had a very big draw. That person, magnetism, and his tenure in office, he had a draw. Some other prime ministers have had to greater or lesser extent. And that's one of the challenges, I think, for the system. We are not voting for prime minister. We're voting for individual representatives. And so, because what can happen when election results come out and a party wins, that party doesn't have to make prime minister who they said they were going to make prime minister. They could make anybody prime minister.
Yeah.
Any elected person, rather, prime minister. Any elected from their group, they could make they could make prime minister. So there's something to it, and I think there's some draw to it. I think it has a lot to do, if impact, it has more to do with financing. If the party leadership is not strong, then people don't want to give money to that party. Funders don't want to fund the party.
And if you don't have the money.
And if you don't have the money, you don't run a good campaign.
Yeah.
Or effective campaign.
One of the things that stood out to me in the particular, I'd say, analysis of the polls was the various methods that they said they would go through to make their predictions. Of course, there was the probability model, but they also said that they relied to a certain extent on historical voting patterns.
Yeah.
And that's a question that I wanted to ask you as a political scientist. How much do you rely on historical voting patterns when making predictions on elections?
So I think that's where I started out talking about that specific thing, that is where the strength of the predictability model comes in,
Okay.
right, the prediction. Relying on historical data has some power to predict. But if you only rely on the numbers, it's not telling you the context in which the election, the variables that were operating at the time of that election. So, and I don't know what variables it doesn't tell you, the report doesn't tell you what variables they considered, so I don't know. So on the face of it, it's hard to say that has a strong predicted value. The other point to that is that it goes back to 1998, right? I make 2 points, 1998. Now, I personally, you can't see this, but I personally have collected all the election data from 1954.
Wow.
So that's what's here. And I have all the data from 1954 to 2020. And you can use that with this model that they use. You could use that data. The data is good enough to use, right? But they don't. They stop at 98. So when the report makes a comment like, pick stock was reliably UDP, and then it flipped to PUP the last week, that's not a true statement.
Okay.
That is factually inaccurate. Because PUP was a very strong, prior to 98, prior to the Elringtons running, PUP was a very, George Pricer was his constituent, that was Jane Usher's constituency. So to make a statement like that has to be qualified to say maybe in the last 4 elections, maybe or 5
Would there be a
elections.
particular reason why they would not include that or discredit
I have
that
no
part
idea. That's
of
the thing. I
history?
don't know. I have no idea. It doesn't explain. It doesn't explain why those years are not considered.
So what are
So you have 19, but from 1981 to 98. That's 17 years of independence, right? And that's not included in the analysis.
Yeah.
I have no explanation.
My next question then would be, what would be some of the variables that you would consider when making predictions?
Well, let me make something clear about variables. By variables, we mean constant conditions. So it's not that every election has completely different set of variables.
Okay.
What it means is that you have a set of variables that you consider, but where the election falls on that variable perspective or spectrum will be different. Example.
Okay.
Campaign funding, money. Very difficult to quantify in Belize, but it could just use that one because people love that one, right? So you would say, okay, so funding is a variable. So you look at elections in 2012 and you say the funding level was X. And then you look at funding in 2020 and say funding elections were Y. So what effect does X and Y have on the election? It's not that you're using completely different variables. You're using where on the spectrum does it fall for that particular variable, right? Then you could look at what we have right here, popularity of the leader. And you look at popularity of the leader in 2003, and then you look at popular leader in 2020 or 2013, whatever year you do, and you say, where is the person popular, not so popular, neutral, unpopular, very unpopular.
Is there
right? And so but I don't know what they did here.
Yeah.
So I can't speak to that.
Is there a direct correlation between the popularity of a party leader and his ability to attract campaign financing?
Well, it's hard to, without doing the research, it's hard to say there's a direct correlation, but there's definitely, there's a correlation, yes, there's a correlation, but there's a causation is another thing. Or the strength of the causation is another thing. Correlation just means it happens at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Causation means that it directly has the effect on it. It doesn't mean not just happening at the same time. And sometimes correlation is not causation. So something could be happening at the same time and it's not the cause of anything, right? It's not related. So it's like saying, selling ice cream in summer is high and selling burglaries are high in the summer. They happen at the same time, but the selling of ice cream and burglaries don't have anything to do with each other. Right?
Yeah.
So yes, there could be. And I think that there is some of that, where an unpopular or a popular leader or let's not even say, not just popular, are trusted, and a leader that's not trusted. Because somebody could be popular and you say, yeah, they like them, but
Yeah.
Yeah, you could see through them.
you could see through it, right? I like the
Yeah.
person. He's a great guy. She's a great woman. You know?
Would that be
So,
like what the document referred to as candidate quality?
well, candidate quality, well, it depends. Depends on what you define by candidate quality.
Okay.
That could be an aspect of candidate quality, but candidate quality could be a number of things. It could be whatever the researcher wants to ascribe to that. So it could be things like, what's the education level? That could be considered
okay.
quality. It could be how many years have they been in politics? How successful they've been in politics? Because I've done some research where we looked at something called experienced candidates. So an experienced candidate would be somebody who has participated, and you could say successfully or unsuccessfully, depends on what you want to look at, in a previous election, or somebody where this is their first elections, right? And really want to say success. So my research has shown that successful candidate, somebody who won at municipal level, like if you were a city councillor or a town board member or a mayor, you do have some success when you run nationally.
Yeah.
And all our prime ministers, except for, but Prime Minister Briceño had a slightly different situation. But the 5 prime ministers, 4 of them were in the city council before they became prime ministers. Prime Minister Briceño was in national government, then was in opposition, then became a city councillor. And if you talk to him, he'll say his city council town board experience in Orange Walk was invaluable, right? What he learned at the local level.
Yeah.
So I think we as voters and the parties should really look at what's your record? Like, have you put yourself on the line? Because going to politics is hard, right? Have you put yourself on the line? What was your record when you were in politics? When you did that, right?
What we're seeing though, if I could throw this in there, is that you have more and more councillors who have their eye on the central government seat. So for instance, they would have participated in the recent municipals earlier this year, just as an example. But their eyes ultimately are on a seat in the National Assembly. So if you look at Kaya Katus, who has been elected for another term as a city councillor, but she's also running in Albert with a view to become the representative for that particular area. It's the same attempt that Alan Pollard tried, to be able to step up, so to speak.
But looking at it over time, okay, you're giving 2 examples in one cycle, right? I mean, we have
Darrell Bradley tried it.
Yeah,
a couple of years back.
But still, I have looked at that data, and the numbers are not great.
Okay.
They're not big, and especially their success rate. We're talking about. I think I had the data on. I have the exact numbers on the people who were previously running elections, and I think the last time was 6. The last elections was 6 people had experience in politics before. Not in politics before. It was their victory at the first time running nationally.
Okay.
Right? Not repeat. We're not talking about people who were repeating. That was somebody who is running for the first time, having had experience previously.
As in municipal?
Municipal, and then running national. So did you move from municipal to national? So Councillor Pollard would be considered, but he was not successful the first time. Councillor Katus would be, because this is her first time moving from one level to the other. Now, if you look at Representative Bernard from Orange Walk, he would be an example of somebody who was successful municipality and then moved international. But that's not the norm. That's not the norm over the course of the history of our electeds from 1954 to now. That is not the norm. That's a very small percentage of people actually do that. Of candidates that actually are able to do that.
So you're saying that it's not the norm for a politician to move from municipal government successfully in the first try to national government. Is there a particular reason why you would have, why you would assume that to be the case?
I didn't assume anything. The research showed that, the statistics showed that this is what happened. These are the numbers where it happened. And when you work at the probability of the strength of that influence of having experience, it's not very strong.
Why do you think that's not the case?
I think it's a party system. I think it's a system. It's a party system and it's electoral system.
Okay.
So the electoral system, let's start with that. The electoral system is that when you are running in a municipality, that's only within that municipality, and the constituencies for national government are much bigger.
Yeah.
For most areas. Belize City is a little different, but for most areas, right? So if you're running in Belize City, you don't have much of any of the like Belize Rural North or Belize Rural South, if any at all. Actually, probably none.
Yeah.
Right? So you could run in Belize City and then run in Albert. And Albert will be within Belize City, so people in the city will know you. But if you're running in Punta Gorda, you will be in Punta Gorda, the town. But when you run in Toledo West or Toledo East, it's a much bigger area. So they're not comparable jurisdictions, right? Now, in other countries where you have state level or what we would call district level persons, that person who runs in a district would then have a purview of the whole constituency.
Yeah.
And to use a very common example, the United States. So if you're a state senator, say the state of where you Tennessee or Georgia or Florida or anywhere, you would have looked at, and you want to run for Congress, your constituency would have been in your state completely, so you could know that constituency.
Yeah.
Because it's in the state that you were working on. But in Belize, it's not like that.
Yeah.
So that's why there's not a strong, I don't think that's why there's not a strong correlation.
Yeah.
And then the parties do not use it as a way to encourage people to run nationally. The party doesn't say within the party who can make up the rules, right? You were talking about the crisis with UDP, right? The party makes up its own rules, own constitution.
Yeah.
So the party can say, listen, we will not endorse somebody who has not run, they could say, they don't say, but who has not run in a municipality before. They could say that.
Yeah.
Right? But they don't. So you have people who become popular because of something, right? And then run nationally their first elections and become a minister, become in cabinet or go into government.
Yeah.
Having done nothing politically before.
Yeah.
One of my final points that I want to raise, Dr. Young, is a feedback that I think we would have gotten from, or we got from the leader of the opposition, Moses Shine Barrow, on the particular poll, because that's the conversation that we started with, where he mentioned that the survey being done with, I think, a little bit less than 1,000 wouldn't be so valid when you compare it to the voting number, which is approximately 200,000. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to research?
That's methodological rubbish, right? Methodologically, and this is not established in Belize, there's a threshold of a certain number of people you need to survey to get a picture. So put it in concrete terms, right? If you survey, I think the number is between 1,500 and 2,500, right? When you get the result, if you do your sampling correct, now you could criticize the sampling method. I don't know what sampling method this survey uses. That's where the details are in how you pull your sample, right? But let me deal with that separately. So if you sample properly, or I don't like the word properly, but legitimately, but you do your sample. Once you pass a certain number, the result doesn't change. So after you pass, let's say 2,000, after you survey 2,000 people, if you survey 10,000 people, it will be the same, basically the same reflection.
Yeah.
If you do your sample properly. So to say that because it's only 1,000 people makes it irrelevant or makes it inaccurate is not true. If the sampling was done properly. Now, when I say by sample, what do I mean? If I stand out on Princess Margaret Drive, right, where there are lots of schools and working people, right, and I come up to anybody who walks up to me and say, what do you think of this? And the person says A or B, and the person says A. Okay, I mark A. Next person, B. That's not a representative sample. That's a sample of that street.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't tell me if I sampled high school students who can't vote, or did it sample only people who teach at the school, so they're tertiary level people, right? So it's not a representative sample of the city of Belize City or of the country. So that's where the detail is. How representative of the population is the sample? So if you have a representative population of 1,500 people, then it will represent the same, give you the same result as if you sample 10,000 people.
All right.
That's it. And that's where they talk about margin of error. If you look at samples and you see margin of error, it's telling you how much above or below this number has predictive value.
Yeah.
So if something says margin of error is 5, it's like, that's not predictive. If it's 2 or within 3.5, then it has predictive power.
All right.
I hope that helps.
Interesting.
All right. Well, Dr. Young, I wish we had more time. I know this is one of those conversations that can take an entire show.
Yes.
We are known to have you on our election coverages. Unfortunately, we only had roughly 25 minutes with you. But of course, we always welcome you back in allowing us to analyze and, of course, bringing your expertise where research and understanding of political science is involved. So thank you so much for joining us.
Can I say one thing?
Of course.
I want to encourage people to, our discussion, not just here, but generally, is always about what is wrong with the system. And that's a valid discussion. But we need to take that discussion from what is wrong to how do we address what is wrong.
Yeah.
And let's stop trying to address what is wrong by wishful thinking. And by that I mean, it's not enough to wish we had better people go into politics. I wish better people go into politics.
Yeah.
I agree, we want better people, but how do we encourage better people to go into politics? What system would make it more viable for people to go in and make people have more confidence in the election? And we're not having that discussion.
Which leads to an erosion of confidence.
What's happening? Yeah, it's causing an erosion of confidence, and we're not dealing with what could restore confidence. And I want to say something about the Constitutional Commission, right? I was involved in that. I'm going to end on this. I was involved at the very beginning. Dr. Vernon and myself, Dylan Vernon, who you all know, Dylan Vernon, and I were involved in that. And we were cut from the program very quickly. Yes. And I want to say, not as a complaint from me, but I want to say that commission had a great possibility. There was great political space for civic leaders, not for the government or any party to tell you what to do, but for civic leaders to really put some thought, and the civic leaders dropped the ball. And I'm telling you I was a consultant and I saw what was going on in the meetings. The civic leaders did not engage. They did not read material that Dr. Vernon and I put to them to read that would have given them the groundwork to start thinking comprehensively and seriously about electoral reform in this country. They dropped the ball. They're happy to get out there. They're happy to get out there and criticize and comment and this is wrong and that. But when they were put around the table with the power of legislature, law, an act, giving them the power to review the Constitution and make recommendations in a report to the Prime Minister, they dropped the ball. And I sat there with them and listened to them machinate, wring their hands about everything that was wrong. And when I said, listen, Dr. Vernon and I said, listen, the act is not perfect. It has problems. That's true. But they're not fatal errors. They're not fatal problems. You have been given a mandate and the political space to do this work. Stop complaining and wringing your hands and do the work. And Dr. Vernon and I are the only two Belizean political scientists with PhD in politics, not lawyers that did a constitutional law class. That does not make you a political scientist or a constitutional law expert.
Yeah.
There may be some lawyers who studied further on, but generally speaking, it does not make you a constitutional law expert or political reform expert. And the only two people in Belize with that level of expertise and experience were cut.
I'd love to ask you.
And no reaction from the public level, and no reaction. Oh, I could tell you what the reason was. There was no reaction from the civic leaders. None.
All right.
You want me to tell you why we were cut?
Sure.
We were cut because we gave advice to the leadership of the commission that they did not like. They didn't like the advice. And it wasn't anything technical or anything crazy. It was a basic fundamental, what your mandate is, you are not fulfilling your mandate. And they didn't like it. And within that week, we were both let go.
Wow.
Or we both separated. I don't want to say let go because it wasn't the same thing between us. But within the week, we were both separated from the commission. Mm-hmm. Wow. And that's an indictment of the commission, not of the government.
Yeah.
The government did not pick those 27 people. Yeah. Those were picked by the civil organizations. Mm-hmm. And they dropped the ball. And I will stick by that. And if you want to discuss that another time, we could talk about that. But that's not productive to me. The productive is that we're not having the proper discussion going forward.
Absolutely.
And we need to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mr. Young, thank you so much for joining us. Perhaps we can continue that conversation after the show even. So thank you so much for your time.
You're
as
welcome.
Well. All right, we are going to take another quick break, and when we come back, the conversation switches into the Maya Creating Civilization exhibit.